Hello everyone, welcome back to the Zekko Football channel. It's finally time, it's finally back for Newcastle. Yes, it's the Champions League. And what better a way to re-enter yourselves into the Champions League than a trip to the San Siro. Today we're going to be diving into and breaking down how the match against AC Milan will play out. If you're new to the channel, please make sure that you subscribe, you like the video and turn on those notifications. But now let's talk AC Milan against Newcastle United in the Champions League. To begin, let's go through and have a look at possible starting 11s for both sides. Let's begin with Milan, as they will be the side at home in this tie. We have Milan in goal, Calabria, Thiaw, Tomori and Theo Hernandez. The midfield three looks like Krunic, Reinders and Loftus-Cheek, with a front three of Christian Pulisic, Olivier Giroud and Rafa Leao. Now, a couple of things we need to talk about. Number one is Leao will absolutely play, even though he looked a little leggy for my liking in the Milan derby. Christian Pulisic I expect to keep his starting space as well. Chukwueze came on in the 56th minute, but I still expect Pulisic to start and look for that substitute later on in the second half if Chukwueze is going to come into the side. Theo Hernandez will keep his spot. Tomori did not play in the Milan derby because he was suspended, so I fully expect him to be coming into the starting lineup. And the big question mark around this Milan side is that they played so poorly against Inter. Will Pioli make any changes going into the game? And I don't think he will make too many changes. Tomori coming in I think is going to be an absolute must, but I think the defeat was so heavy. I think Pioli's going to want this side to go back out and prove themselves once more. They are better than what they showed against Inter, who were the more dominant side, who were the better side in that match. And sometimes it's easier to get over a bigger loss than it is to get over a smaller one. A 2-1 defeat in the last minute is extremely difficult to get over, and arguably a 5-1 defeat, even though it was a huge loss to their major rivals, mentally they might be able to reset that little bit more. Loftus-Cheek I expect to keep his place, and Calabria as well coming into that midfield, but we'll talk about that in the tactics later. Leao must play for me. He is the danger man for them, and I do like Pulisic, but it's all about that man out on that left-hand side. But this is the Milan team going into the Champions League and how I believe they will line up. Newcastle will be taking that trip to Milan, and this is how I believe they will line up. Nick Pope in goal, Kieran Trippier, Fabian Schär, Sven Botman and Dan Burn. The major question mark for me is around Dan Burn, especially when you consider the fact that he could be up against the lightning rod that is Christian Pulisic. It's unlikely that they swap wings, but if Leao ever came over to this right-hand side, I think Burn is going to be seriously exposed. A lot is going to be put on the midfielders to come and cover for him, but I would also argue that you could see a Lewis Hall come in for this side. I could see Tino Livramento coming in because they have that pace, they have that dynamism to be able to go up the flanks and down. I know that Eddie Howe is a big fan of Dan Burn. I understand he trusts him, but it's a huge thing to be doing it against a danger player and a danger man like Christian Pulisic. Get those crosses into the box, beat his man. If he starts to struggle, I can see it being a very long evening for Dan Burn. Moving into the midfield, we have Bruno Guimaraes, Joe Linton, who I believe will be back if he is fit enough. The question mark is surrounding his fitness. However, I think from what I've understood, he should be back. If he's not, you can see Sean Longstaff coming into the side for Joe Linton. And of course, you have the Milan boy himself, Sandro Tonali, in this side. I think Eddie Howe's rested him on the weekend. There's a few changes in this lineup from the team that played against Brentford, and I think Tonali will be one of them, as is Almiron. I think he'll come into the starting lineup to try and defend with Kieran Trippier against Rafa Leao. And then you moving Gordon over to this left-hand side. Gordon's work rate, I think, is absolutely essential. He can help out Dan Burn at the same time. And then you've got the change. Even though he got his goal, I think Callum Wilson will be changed out for Alexander Isak. This is arguably the strongest Newcastle side that you could play, and they're going to need it against a Milan side that is going to want to bounce back from a horrendous defeat. These are the lineups. So how will the game break down? Well, first of all, I think it's important from a Newcastle perspective to understand what's going on. And by that, I mean understanding the occasion. This is the first time that Newcastle are back in the Champions League, and they're attending one of the most dangerous grounds in world football, the San Siro. It is extremely important that they maintain their discipline, but also make sure they are pragmatic about the way they approach, and I'm sure Eddie Howe will do this. If we have a look at the Newcastle team, the players that I have highlighted here are actually the players with international Champions League experience, and if you look at this side, there isn't too much. Alexander Isak has only played 1 game, Zern Botman has played 5 games, and the other 2 in Trippier and Tonali are very well versed. If you contrast that with the AC Milan side, who reached the semi-final of the Champions League, adding in Christian Pulisic as well, and Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who have together played numerous amounts of Champions League football, I think there's going to be a little bit of a mismatch here. Compile this with the San Siro and the amount of the atmosphere and the fans baying for blood, I think Newcastle might be within their rights to tuck into their shell a little bit. It's this time that they need to be brave and bold and really go out and fight, but don't expect them to dominate possession, don't expect them to dominate the ball. It'd be fantastic if they did, but they need time to grow into the competition, they need time to be able to get on the ball. Tonali needs to have a moment, and it is a really big opportunity for him here. However, he's playing at the ground and against the club that he grew up with, so he might feel a little bit out of it. He might feel a little bit out of sorts. All of these mental factors go into this kind of game, and it's this kind of stuff that people don't really talk about. It's the mental side of the game that is extremely important, as well as the physical side. And it might naturally have an impact on the way they physically work. Almiron might be a little bit overawed by the occasion. Anthony Gordon hasn't really played in a moment like this. Joe Linton, while he is really physically fit, and it could be Longstaff as well, I believe that some of these players might get a little bit of stage fright. Now, that's not to say they can't grow into the competition, but it's just something to remember. It's probably one of the toughest grounds to go to for a first leg of a Champions League group, and I think this will really test Newcastle's mettle. But how will it break down? Well, first of all, I don't expect them to have too much of the ball. I expect them to huddle back in their shell, make themselves difficult to beat, and then hit AC Milan on the transition. I think that's where they're weakest, and I think it's also where Newcastle are strongest. So AC Milan will dominate the ball, and it will look something like this. The duels are going to be absolutely crucial, and the 2 that I've already highlighted are out on the flanks. Pulisic up against Dan Burn, and you've got Rafa Leao against Kieran Trippier. And at the same time, you also need to make sure that Almiron and Anthony Gordon come back to really help their fullbacks. Then you've got the likes of Olivier Giroud occupying the 2 main centre-backs. But what you need to make sure from a Newcastle perspective is they do not get into this yellow highlighted area. This is where Pulisic and Leao, specifically Leao, are going to want to get to. Once they have them driving in towards the box, towards the byline, it's really up to them. You're going to have overlapping runs from Theo Hernandez. Calabria is going to walk into midfield to be next to Krunic to make that extra body, allowing the likes of Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Reinders to then go forwards, supporting the likes of Olivier Giroud and making those late off-the-ball runs. It's going to be difficult for Newcastle to really hold with this AC Milan team, who have a lot of quality about them. But if they do, I believe the counter-attacking opportunities are going to be there, and they should look something like this. I spoke about the duels from a defensive point of view for Newcastle, but offensively, they're definitely awesome as well. Anthony Gordon, I believe, has the physical attributes to get the better of Calabria. I believe that Joe Linton and Sean Longstaff, I might add, can get the better of Ruben Loftus-Cheek. It's all about the running power. Tonali can do the same. And then you've got the likes of Almiron judging and gambling against the likes of Theo Hernandez to be able to go off and hit them on the break. I think that Alexander Isak could have the beating of Tomori and Thiaw, and then you've got the way that Newcastle can go forwards. Transition is going to be absolutely key, and utilising the wings in certain scenarios to then play the crosses through, I think is going to be absolutely massive in getting Alexander Isak, arguably the most impactful player in this game, into the match. Bruno Guimaraes is going to have a job on to try and keep that metronome ticking, and if he can keep that happening, and the more that the AC Milan fans and the Milan fans can really get against their own side, the better for Newcastle. They can keep it at 0-0 or even nick an early goal, and all of a sudden things change, and the Milan fans start to bay for blood, but for their own team, not for the opposition. It's going to be a key night for Newcastle. I believe they could do something special here. However, they need to keep their heads, they need to keep their mettle, and they need to believe in the system that Eddie Howe has put in. Keep the work, keep the mentality, and I think they could walk away with a victory. But remember, a draw isn't too bad. It's the first game of the Champions League group stage, and it's going to be incredibly tough. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below on this matchup. I would love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. And I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, take care.